The Forgotten World. The Valari had never built their cities to withstand war. Erinder was a world of soft light and quiet ambition, a planet where towers curved like growing crystal and rivers flowed through open academies instead of fortifications. The Valari believed knowledge was a better defense than weapons. For centuries, that belief had held true. No one had ever wanted what Erinder possessed. There were no rare minerals beneath its surface. No strategic hyperspace routes passed through its system. No military shipyards orbited its skies. Only thinkers lived there. Philosophers, engineers, artists. A peaceful species in a galaxy that respected strength but tolerated harmless beauty. Until the Carvax arrived. They came without warning. No declaration, no negotiation, no demands. Their warships translated into orbit like black scars across the stars. Their arrival, so sudden that Erinder's planetary defense grid did not even register them as hostile until the first city vanished in white fire. The Carvax Dominion did not conquer. They erased. Their doctrine was carved into the hulls of their vessels in burning glyphs. Only strength deserves existence. Erinder had none. Within hours, orbital stations were shattered. Communication arrays fell silent one by one as precision strikes severed the Valari from the wider galaxy. Defense platforms attempted resistance. They lasted 8 minutes. The Dominion ships moved with brutal efficiency, not interested in occupation, not interested in surrender. Only completion. On the surface, panic spread like a living storm. Valari cities had no bunkers, no hardened shelters, no evacuation drills. Their infrastructure was designed for cooperation, not survival. Families fled into open plazas as transport networks collapsed under bombardment. Scholars who had spent their lives studying stellar physics now found themselves staring helplessly at falling fire from the sky. The first ground forces landed before the smoke had cleared. Carvax warforms descended in armored carriers that slammed into the surface like meteors. They emerged as towering shapes of plated muscle and mechanical augmentation, built not merely to fight, but to dominate. They did not issue commands. They advanced. Energy weapons turned defensive barricades into vapor. Civilians ran. There was nowhere to run to. Erinder's High Conclave convened an emergency session beneath the Hall of Resonance, a chamber built for debate, not crisis. The galaxy had to be informed. Help had to be requested. A distress signal was transmitted to the Galactic Assembly. It carried no accusations, no demands, only facts. We are under attack. We cannot resist. We request assistance. The signal reached the Assembly within minutes. The response took longer, not because it was difficult, but because it required calculation. Erinder had no alliances, no trade leverage, no military contribution. Intervening against the Dominion would provoke retaliation. The cost of action outweighed the value of the world. The official reply arrived hours later. Polite, sympathetic, final. The Assembly regrets that it cannot authorize intervention at this time. The message included condolences. It did not include help. News of the refusal spread quickly. Hope vanished even faster. Evacuation efforts began immediately, though few believed they would succeed. Civilian transports launched in desperate waves toward deep space. Unarmed, unshielded, slow. The Dominion hunted them for sport. Warships peeled away from the bombardment to pursue the fleeing vessels, disabling engines before destroying them one by one. Fragments of burning hulls streaked across Erinder's sky. The Conclave watched from orbiting monitors until the feeds went dark. By the second day, half the planet's population centers were gone. By the third, organized resistance had ceased. The Dominion began the final phase. Surface purge. In the final hours, the Conclave gathered once more. There would be no rescue, no miracle, no last-minute intervention. The galaxy had made its decision. Still, tradition demanded that history be preserved. If they could not survive, they could at least be remembered. A final signal was prepared, not directed at the Assembly, not sent to allies, but broadcast blindly into deep space, beyond political boundaries, beyond mapped routes, beyond expectation. It contained no request for military aid, no plea for victory, only a record, who they were, what they had built, and what had been lost. At the end of the transmission, the final line was spoken by the eldest member of the conclave. If this message is ever heard, let it be known that we lived. The signal was launched moments before the Hall of Resonance was destroyed. Across Arinder, the sky burned. The last cities fell in silence. Valari survivors gathered in open spaces not out of strategy, but because there was nowhere else left to go. They watched the descending shapes of Carvax purge ships break through the cloud layer. They listened to the distant thunder of annihilation moving closer. No one spoke of rescue anymore, because everyone understood the truth. The galaxy had already answered, and the answer was no. As the first shadows of the Purge fleet passed across the ruins below, the Valari waited for the end, believing what every calculation, every message, every silence had confirmed. No one was coming. The signal that shouldn't have been heard. The message should have died in silence. By the time the Valari transmission left Irinder's atmosphere, the planet itself was already burning. Its origin point had been destroyed, its infrastructure shattered, its signal degraded by interference from orbital bombardment. It was not a distress call by military standards. It carried no tactical data, no coordinates for reinforcement, no expectation of response, only a fading record of a species preparing to vanish. As it traveled across interstellar space, fragments of it were lost, torn apart by radiation fields, distorted by gravitational drift, scattered by cosmic noise. Weeks passed, then months. By the time it reached the outer listening posts of another star system, it was barely more than a whisper, and it was almost ignored. Humanity's deep space listening network was not designed for rescue. It existed for curiosity, for discovery, for the endless human need to know what was out there. Station Kestrel. 9 orbited a lonely gas giant at the far edge of human-controlled space, a silent sentinel listening to the dark between stars. Most signals detected there were meaningless. Background radiation. Dead transmissions from ancient civilizations. Static. So when the Valari signal appeared, fragmented and weak, it was flagged automatically for deletion. Corrupted. Incomplete. Non-actionable. Routine. Except for one thing. It didn't repeat. Most natural signals echoed in predictable patterns. This one did not. It spoke once, and stopped. Senior communications analyst Mara Ellison almost dismissed it. Her shift had already been long. The station was quiet. Nothing significant had appeared in weeks. But something about the signal held her attention. Not its structure. Its tone, even degraded. The cadence of the message was unmistakable. It was not technical. It was not political. It was mournful. She ran a manual reconstruction. The system advised against it. Probability of meaningful recovery, 3%. She did it anyway. Fragments aligned. Language matrices struggled. Translation algorithms failed twice before stabilizing. When a message finally resolved, it filled the small monitoring room with soft, unfamiliar voices. Not pleading, not demanding, simply recording. Mara listened in silence as the Valari described their world. Their cities, their art, their belief that cooperation had been enough to survive. She listened as they spoke of the invasion, not with anger, but with sorrow. And then came the final line, a voice older than the rest. Calm, resigned. If this message is ever heard, let it be known that we lived. Mara didn't move for a long time, because this wasn't a call for help. It was a eulogy. Protocol required the signal to be archived and classified as historical data. Extinct civilization notice. No further action. That's what the system recommended. But Mara forwarded it anyway. Not to the historical division. To command. The message reached Earth within hours. It passed through layers of analysis, linguistic verification, signal authentication, threat assessment. There was no deception, no manipulation, no hidden request. Only loss. Humanity was not a member of the Galactic Assembly. In fact, humanity had never been invited. Too volatile, too emotional, too prone to intervention where logic dictated restraint. But humanity listened, and humanity understood something the rest of the galaxy did not. This wasn't strategy. It was goodbye. The briefing room was silent when the message ended. No one spoke immediately, because the implication was obvious. By the time the signal had reached them, the Valari were likely already gone. A species erased before humanity had even known it existed. Standard procedure would have marked the event as tragic but irrelevant. There was no political obligation, no alliance, no strategic benefit, nothing to gain. But humanity had never built its ethics around gain. Someone in the room asked the only question that mattered. Did they ask for help? Mara's recorded analysis answered. No. Another voice followed. Then why send it? The answer came quietly, so someone would remember. The decision did not take long. There was no debate about cost, no discussion of resource allocation, no projection of political consequences, because the choice had already been made the moment the message was understood. Humanity did not measure worth the same way the galaxy did. Where others saw value in territory, humans saw value in existence itself. An extinction was not acceptable. Orders were issued within minutes. Not to diplomats, not to ambassadors, to the military. Prepare Rapid Intervention Task Group. No declaration of war was drafted. No formal authorization requested from the Assembly, because the Assembly had already chosen not to act. Humanity did not need permission. Strategists analyzed the available data. By the time they could arrive, Irinder would likely be in its final phase of destruction. Orbital superiority could not be guaranteed. Surface resistance would be non-existent. Conventional fleet engagement would come too late. So humanity chose an approach the galaxy had rarely seen. Not overwhelming force, not bombardment, but presence. Immediate, unavoidable, human. The operation was given a name. Skyfall Protocol. It would not begin with ships. It would begin with soldiers. Across Earth's defense networks, alerts spread. Drop divisions mobilized. Exo-armor units deployed. Orbital insertion craft were prepared for rapid launch. Human warriors trained for the most dangerous battlefield imaginable, one where they would arrive alone. Because the truth was simple. Even if the Valari were already gone, even if the planet had already fallen, even if no one remained to save, humanity would still go. Not because they had been asked, but because someone had spoken into the dark, and humanity had heard them. The launch countdown began, and for the first time since the Valari sent their final message, someone was coming. The day the sky opened. By the time the Carvax initiated the final purge, Irinder had already stopped screaming. The cities that once shimmered with living light now lay in fractured silence. Towering crystal spires were reduced to jagged skeletons. The great learning halls had become fields of ash. There was no resistance left, no organized defense, no remaining orbital presence. Only survivors, and even they no longer ran. They gathered instead, in plazas, in ruins, in open fields where the sky could be seen clearly. Because when extinction comes from above, there is no point hiding from it. High above the broken world, the Carvax Purge fleet descended into low orbit. Their warships moved with slow inevitability, positioning themselves over the last known population centers. Surface scans confirmed what they already expected. No military structures remained. No functioning defenses. Only scattered life signs. The final phase would begin shortly. Eradication from orbit. Clean. Efficient. Absolute. Below, the last Valari watched the clouds glow with distant engine fire. They had already accepted what would come next. The sky would burn. The world would end. And no one would know they had ever existed. The first human capsule entered the atmosphere unnoticed. It was too small to register as a threat, too fast to intercept, too insignificant to matter. Dominion sensors classified it as debris. Then another followed, and another. Within seconds, dozens of objects pierced the upper atmosphere, each wrapped in a sheath of fire as friction ignited the air around them. Soon, hundreds burned across the sky. To the Valari below, it looked like a meteor storm, a final cosmic farewell. Some believed it was the universe itself marking their end. the Carvax saw something else. Anomaly, but not danger. Not yet. The sky began to glow. Lines of fire streaked across the heavens in every direction, descending toward the surface with terrifying speed. Thousands now. Too many to track. Still, they were small. No signatures of known weapons. No propulsion trails. No formation patterns. The Dominion delayed response. They had seen worlds collapse beneath orbital bombardment before. This was nothing. The first impact shattered that assumption. A capsule struck the ground outside a ruined city with the force of an artillery shell, carving a crater into stone and ash. Then another struck nearby, and another. Across the planet, impacts rippled outward like thunder. The earth shook. Shockwaves rolled through broken streets. The survivors stared upward in confusion, because extinction was not supposed to arrive like this. The capsules did not explode. They opened. Armor-blackened figures emerged from within. Human drop troopers, encased in gravity-forged exoframes built for the most hostile battlefields imaginable. Their descent had not been cautious. It had not been safe. It had been immediate, direct, unforgiving. Humanity had not sent ships first. They had sent warriors. The first Carvax ground unit encountered them minutes later. Dominion warforms advanced toward one of the impact zones, expecting scavengers or malfunctioning debris. Instead, they found resistance. Precise, relentless. Human weapons did not fire wildly. They struck with purpose, targeting joints, sensors, power cores. Within moments, the Carvax unit was destroyed. Not delayed, not repelled, erased. Across a render, similar encounters unfolded. Human drop teams moved quickly, securing civilian clusters before establishing defensive perimeters. They did not advance toward strategic objectives. They did not seek command centers. They moved toward life, protecting first, fighting second. This made no sense to the Dominion. War was about dominance, efficiency, territory. Yet these new arrivals fought differently. They shielded survivors with their own armor bodies. They carried the wounded while under fire. They held ground, even when outnumbered. One Carvax commander observed a human soldier step directly into the path of a plasma strike to protect a smaller, fragile being. The blast struck the human instead. The soldier fell, but the Valari behind them lived. The act had no tactical advantage, no strategic value. It was illogical, and therefore deeply unsettling. The Dominion escalated response. Heavier units deployed. Aerial support descended. Yet the humans did not retreat. They adapted. They fought in coordinated squads, using terrain, debris, and even the ruins themselves as cover. Their communication networks synchronized movements across vast distances. Where one unit faltered, another reinforced. Where one line broke, another formed. And always, civilians were placed behind them. To the Valari, the sight was incomprehensible. Beings from another world, unknown, uninvited, standing between them and extinction. The sky had not delivered destruction. It had delivered defenders. Warriors who had arrived, not in ships, but by falling from the heavens themselves. High above, Dominion Command finally understood. This was not debris. This was not resistance. This was intervention. An unknown species had entered the conflict without warning, and they had done so in the most direct way possible, by descending straight into the fire. For the first time since the campaign began, the Purge timetable faltered, because something had changed on Arinder. The survivors were no longer alone, and the beings who had arrived did not fight like conquerors. They fought like guardians, and they were not leaving. The species that refused to look away. The Dominion had never encountered resistance like this. Across Arinder, the battlefield had transformed. What had once been a dying world now pulsed with defiance. Human drop forces held fractured cities, shattered plains, and refugee clusters with stubborn resolve. They fought in defensive rings around the surviving Valari, turning open plazas and broken structures into fortified sanctuaries. The Carvax adapted quickly, deploying heavier warforms, aerial hunters, and siege platforms. But they had prepared to eliminate a helpless species. not to confront an enemy willing to fall from the sky itself. The first full-scale counterattack came at dawn. Dominion ground divisions advanced in coordinated waves toward the largest concentration of survivors, a ruined capital district where thousands of Valari had gathered beneath human protection. From orbit, strike craft descended to support the assault. Human drop teams responded instantly. Anti-air systems unfolded from their descent capsules, tracking incoming threats with surgical precision. Missile fire streaked upward. Several Carvax craft fell in flames before reaching engagement range. Others broke through. Close-quarters combat erupted. Human soldiers fought alongside one another with seamless coordination, covering flanks, reinforcing weak points, pulling wounded comrades from the line without hesitation. They did not retreat when outmatched. They did not abandon positions when encircled. And when the line bent, it never broke. For the Dominion, this was deeply unfamiliar. Most species collapsed once orbital dominance was lost. Others surrendered when faced with superior numbers. Humans did neither. They fought as if defeat were not an option worth considering. Again and again, Carvax commanders observed the same phenomenon. Humans prioritizing the defense of non-combatants over tactical advantage. Squads diverting resources to evacuate civilians rather than press an attack. Soldiers standing their ground in impossible conditions simply to buy time for others. It was inefficient, irrational, and devastatingly effective. The battle raged for hours. Then something new appeared in the sky, larger than the falling capsules. Slower, deliberate. Human ships. The orbital fleet had arrived. The Dominion immediately shifted focus. Until now, they had faced ground resistance. Now, they faced a species capable of contesting space itself. Human warships translated into orbit in tight formation. Their arrival silent but unmistakable. No broadcast preceded them. No declaration was issued. They did not ask for terms. They did not offer negotiation. They moved directly into combat positions, and they opened fire. The orbital engagement was brief but decisive. Human vessels fought with calculated aggression, targeting Dominion command ships and communication relays first. Without centralized coordination, the Carvax fleet faltered. Within minutes, their formation fractured. Several attempted withdrawal. Others were destroyed where they stood. For the first time in the campaign, the Dominion was losing control. On the surface, the shift was immediate. Human reinforcements began landing through stabilized drop corridors. Heavier units deployed. Mobile defense platforms unfolded. The tide turned. Dominion forces that had once advanced unchallenged now found themselves pushed back. Encircled, driven from the very ground they had claimed. The final confrontation came near the ruins of the Hall of Resonance, where the Valari's last message had been sent. Dominion Command attempted to regroup there, establishing a fortified position for evacuation. Human forces closed in from all sides. The battle was fierce, but it was short, because humanity was not fighting for territory. They were fighting for certainty, for the guarantee that this would never happen again. Dominion Command was destroyed. Remaining forces withdrew from the system soon after. Erinder was no longer marked for extinction. In the days that followed, silence returned to the world. Not the silence of death, but of survival. Valari survivors emerged from shelters and ruins, uncertain of what future awaited them. They had expected annihilation. Instead, they found guardians. The first formal meeting took place beneath the broken sky. Valari leadership, what remained of it, approached the human command unit. Their question was simple, honest, and filled with confusion. You came, their representative said. We had nothing to offer you. No alliance, no resources, no strategic value. The human commander listened, then answered, we didn't come for value. A pause followed. We came because you were alone. The words spread quickly, across Erinder, across human channels, and eventually across the wider galaxy. The Galactic Assembly learned what had happened, not through diplomatic report, but through observation, because the Dominion's retreat had not been subtle, and humanity's involvement had not been authorized. They had broken the oldest rule of interstellar politics. Do not fight wars that gain you nothing. Humanity did not see it that way. To them, extinction was not an acceptable outcome, even for strangers. In time, the story became something more than history. Among the Valari, it became legend. The day the sky did not bring fire, but salvation. And across the stars, a quiet understanding began to form. When the galaxy calculates cost, when logic demands indifference, when survival becomes a matter of statistics, there exists one species that may still arrive. Not because it must, but because it chooses to. A species that refuses to look away. And when they come, they do not always arrive in ships. Sometimes, they fall from a sky.